Salutations, sweeties! It's been a while since I made a longer form video, and that's mostly because I'm still working on making the quilt we voted on making a few months ago. Turns out that sewing a quilt takes a lot of time, and I knew that, but I guess I didn't really understand. So I'm still working on that, and I just need a little bit more time to finish it. But while I've been working on the quilt, I started to think that the little starburst quilt blocks that I've been sewing would make a pretty cute plushie. Now, the straw man of my self-doubt begs the question, what on earth would possess you to think that? And the truth is, I like stuffed animals. I like plushies. I think they're cute. They're one of my favorite things. And I think a lot of stuff would just be cute as a plushie. Potted plant, cute. Dice, cute. Discontinued 90s kids toy, cute. So, quilt, cute. I think it's fairly evident that I have justified myself enough. So, let's get into it. I made a little sketch of the design I want to do, and it's just a basic starburst block that I've gotten relatively proficient at putting together recently. As far as the color palette, I found these adorable 2 little vintage fabrics at a neighborhood garage sale, and I'm gonna make a trans pride quilt block. Now, to be fair, I only found out that this fabric was vintage after about halfway through the cutting process, when I decided to look up the collection to see if I could get more of it to make a pair of overalls. Unfortunately, I don't think that's gonna happen. Anyway, I started assembling my block by sewing my pink squares to some blue rectangles at an angle so that they could be folded and pressed to make the points of the starburst. Which sounds hard, but if you just draw yourself a guideline with some disappearing ink, it's actually super easy. Then I trimmed off the excess to keep the block from getting too bulky to sew on my machine. Don't worry, I'm keeping the offcuts to use in a future project, as yet undetermined. Then I just mirrored the process on the other side of my blue rectangle with the other pink square. And since I still haven't found a smooth way to transition into the topic, let's just jump right in to Book Club Corner. Full disclosure, I actually mostly just listened to anime play in the background while I was sewing the majority of this project, but I did listen to a couple of audiobooks while I was doing chores during the time that I was filming, so I'm gonna count it. The first book I want to talk about is It Was Vulgar and It Was Beautiful, How AIDS Activists Used Art to Fight a Pandemic by Jack Lowery. Obviously, this book is a bit of a bummer. It has a lot of loss and a lot of heartache in it, but I think it does a pretty good job of laying out a timeline of the work done by Grand Fury, both before and during their time with ACT UP. This book is by no means an instructional guide on organizing, but I think there's still a lot to be learned from the actions of elders and past activists, as well as just a value of learning queer history. Honestly, I think there's a lot of conversation and discourse that could be had over the contents of the book and queer activism as a whole, and I would highly recommend giving it a read. The other 2 books I want to talk about are short little novella type books called Fina and Defekt, both by Nino Cipri. They are both pretty fun sci-fi romps that have a slight horror edge, and some pretty powerfully written queer characters. Basically imagine if a legally distinct from IKEA could open up holes into another dimension. The books aren't direct sequels of each other, but they are sharing a couple of characters and they do exist within the same story universe. I found them highly entertaining. They really tickled my imagination. I would highly recommend reading. Okay, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Book Club Corner is over. Back to the project at hand. Once I had the core of the block assembled, I needed to pick out some fabric for the border. I did go through basically all of my white fabric options. I don't tend to use white a lot in a lot of my sewing, but I was able to find this very cute checkered pattern that I think contrasts nicely with the organic shapes in the vintage pattern, but is subtle enough that it doesn't clash. Once I picked out my fabric, I cut 2 strips to the size of my raw block. Those are going to go on the sides, and once I have those attached, I'm going to measure again for the length I need to use for the top and bottom border. In theory, I could just do the math and cut all 4 borders at one time, but I'm still not crazy good at quilting, so I'm just going to err on the side of caution and measure multiple times. Is doing it this way a little time inefficient? Yeah, definitely it is, but I'm also still struggling to consistently sew in a straight line, so I think that a little inefficiency is kind of the least of my worries. That being said, I do actually think that I did a pretty good job of getting the border attached in terms of squaring everything up, and obviously after that staggering success of the ability to attach 4 rectangles to 1 square, I had to take a cat break to celebrate. Sweet little Seven came over and let me pet her, which is always a gift that she knows I cherish. Here you can see the complete block. I think it's really darling, but this is when I became aware of just how translucent the fabric I was working with was. You can really see the uneven nature of the color when you look at where the seams are folded over. As cool as it is to see held up to the light, I did want to even out the opacity, so I did cut up some scrap fabric to use as a lining. Needing to add the lining did make me really glad that I had trimmed my block of excess fabric. Not that my sewing machine is bad, I actually really like my machine, but I just get so nervous about if I'm gonna break my machine. I don't know where to get a machine repaired, especially since I got mine secondhand, so I'm very, very careful with it. I never want to damage any of the internal parts or overstrain any of the mechanisms. Okay, setting my general anxiety aside, it's now time to turn this quilt block into a plushie by adding leggies and little arms, or as my wife and I were calling them, slappers. For the legs, I used a modified pattern from stuffed animals and all the trimmings, and mostly it was just making them shorter so they'd fit better on my little buddy. Here you can see me eyeballing how long I want the legs to be by laying my block over a little mouse that I had made a while back using the same leg pattern. And once I decided on that, my wife used her super powerful math brain to freehand a pattern of proportional length for the little slappers. And then I just had to do my least favorite part of every sewing project, which is cutting out the pieces. Yes, I'm using kid scissors. No, it's not because I might cut myself. It's because my wife keeps all the scissors in our house super sharp, so I can use any old pair for any old thing. She spoils me, and I'm grateful. Then I use the magic of editing to speed the process along, and also make the lamest visual gag in history, which I guess I should be embarrassed by, but it genuinely made me laugh, so I'm not gonna apologize. After getting everything cut out, it was time to sew the limbs together, and I thought that it had gone pretty smoothly, but the footage tells a different story. I really look like I'm struggling here, and I don't remember why that would be, so I just layered them on top of each other to hide all of my weird struggles, and we're just gonna move on. Speaking of, it's time to stuff the limbs, and I did a combination of beanbag pellets and stuffing, because I really wanted there to be a little bit of weight and heft in the limbs to offset the bulkiness of the body. I don't know if it's just me or if anybody else also feels this way, but there's a specific almost pouty look that stuffies stuffed with beanbag filling have, and I find it really endearing. And while I'm on the subject of aesthetics, I might as well say that I wanted to keep the square of the body very blocky, and so I'm stuffing it with upholstery foam to keep it squishy but also semi-rigid. Once I got the limbs put together, it was time for the final assembly, and that process was pretty slow because I was being really careful, but it went pretty smoothly, so I'll take it. And here we are. Here's the final little quilt block. Aren't they such a cute little buddy? They're such a cute little friend. I can't handle it. I love them so much. Real talk, I don't think I've been this proud of myself in a long time. Just like executing the whole concept really made me super, super happy. And as you can see, the upholstery foam is very squishy and it worked out just the way I had hoped. But despite loving this tiny friend very, very much, I have to ask myself, is this really a plushie? Like, it's a stuffy, to be sure, but it's not made with plush fabrics. Can I really call it a plushie? Well, joke's on you, and me, and everyone, because I have plush fabric in the house, and I can make a truly plushy plush. Ta-da! I made a second one, and it's also cute. And then the quality inspector had to check both of them out, and I do believe they both got full approval. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making these. I think they came out really cute, and I hope that you liked them as well. Let me know in the comments which one you think is better. I think they both have their merits, and I haven't named them yet, so shout out cute names that you think they should have in the comments as well. I love you, have a good pride, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!